Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Inertia Creeps. Today I'm joined by André Skepple. André is a bit of a legend calling in to us today from the UK. André, I'm really excited to talk to you because you have a really interesting take on neurodivergence, and I think there's so many different areas we can explore together. But one of the reasons I set up this show and what this show kind of stands for is I heard a phrase recently that the standards you walk past are the standards you accept. And what I wanted to do with this show was to kind of challenge those standards and challenge I suppose to a degree, the corporate world, but in general, just challenge us all to think about embracing difference and understanding not just neurodiversity, but diversity in general, and take it away from what is kind of, often dismissed as a bit of a woke conversation and bring it more into the realms of, let's just accept that we're all different, regardless of whether it's race, gender, sexuality or neurodivergence, like we all have our different ways of doing things. And really, I kind of want to have I suppose I just want to have a conversation about making the world a bit of a better place, make the workplace more human. So I suppose to start with, just to give you an opportunity to introduce yourself, maybe tell me a little bit about FullSpektrum and where it's come from.
Absolutely. So, no, it's an absolute pleasure to join this conversation today. Thanks so much for giving me this opportunity and share this platform. André Skepple, founder and CEO of FullSpektrum. FullSpektrum, in a nutshell, is a company that was born from first-hand frustration. And what I mean by that is that I'm neurodivergent, I'm dyslexic, and recently identified as very likely having ADHD. Now, my neurodivergence was first confirmed when I was second year university. So I was basically 22. 22 years of my life, I had no idea that I had these conditions that were making it difficult for me to attain knowledge and be examined in the same level and expectation as everybody else. And so when you are going through the school system and even though my intelligence was heavily masking conditions that aren't really seen or understood by the common educator, effectively what I was set into was an environment that I can try as hard as I can, but until I get the support or the environment that's tailored to how I think and who I am, you're never going to be an overachiever. You're never going to be an A star. You're fine in being a B and you're good at being an A, but we want A stars. And for someone like me that was always ambitious since I was a child, and one of my key ambitions was to get into medicine. And as everyone knows, to do a medical degree, your grades have to be pretty immaculate, especially if you want to go into one of the top Russell Group or Ivy League universities and schools. And so the system was always rigged and kind of set against me. And from when I discovered that I was neurodivergent, it made sense. It was very much an empowering moment that not only did I use to figure out what my journey through academia needs to become, but I actually couldn't shut up about it. I had to speak to as many people as possible around me, and other people around me became inspired and empowered from my neurodivergent discovery, and they realized that they're neurodivergent too, and they were getting their support, and it started a ripple effect. And that was the first time I realized that this is a topic. This is before it even became a trending topic. It's one of the number one trending topics in the world at the moment. But my involvement was way before that, and starting the whole conversation about advocacy and everything like that, it started from just seeing the opportunity to make a difference. Now, my challenge was, well, how do I, satisfy my intent, my passion in making the world a better place? I could do it for medicine, but then you're doing it one person at a time, and it's in a system that is it's not really fit for purpose. You could look at an educator, a teacher, which I could have become. I did some volunteer teaching. I sat at school for African children, and I said, yeah, I can work with children. I can teach them based on personalizing the pedagogy to be better suited to their neurodevelopmental condition. and the interest in how to think, everything like that. But once again, you can only be doing it by one child at a time in very small clusters, and therefore the impact, yeah, you're making impact on an individual level, but I was very ambitious about it. What must I do to make that impact? And so when I spent my time working within the science industry, so my specialism is in diagnostics, developing platforms to identify if a person has a particular type of condition or disease. So looking at the most unique element of that condition, and then developing platforms that use the recognition indicators to say, we've identified what it is, we've detected it, this is how much it is, and therefore this is the condition, and therefore the right treatment, the right interventions can then be administered. I was doing that for big pharmaceutical companies, for large diagnostic companies, small startups, and also the top universities and research institutes across the world. And through my travels and through the experience I've had in solving other people's problems, the one thing that was never satisfied is my ambition. I wasn't able to get to what I could do, which is to innovate. I was only there to advise and to sell and make someone else's dreams come true. So I became an entrepreneur. I said to myself, I've got this really good idea. I'm going to take the leap. And the idea was, what if we were to take the definition of diagnostics and the onset of big data and technologies that included cloud technologies. And I mean, at the time, artificial intelligence was a very like a bespoke topic. It was science fiction. And then very quickly, generative AI became science fact. So we've now converged all those different disciplines plus the passion of social impact to create what we've now got is a Web3 multi-blockchain based multi-AI support intelligence platform that does three things. Number one, it identifies, it screens every person who is neurodivergent or not to identify what their strengths and weaknesses, and therefore what are the recognition elements that pertains to their condition, whether it's dyslexia, dyspraxia, autism, ADHD. It identifies it. Upon identification, it does the second thing. Number two, it then tells AIs to work with other AIs to cluster and to collaborate in developing the right strategies, content, curriculum plans, training elements, and anything that's needed to deliver a personalized education or personalized health or care intervention support to that person. And then the third thing is that upon delivery of these support and mechanisms that have been created as its own theory of change to make an impact to the individual, the AI then learns how the learner learns, and also how other people, so educators, healthcare workers, social workers, even parents in the wider community who all work with, if it's a young person or child, it could be an adult learner, they learn off the back of how best to implement and improve and iterate the optimal environments for success. And so the AIs then become smarter and more dynamic and creating whole neuroinclusive environments that are not just adapted to one particular person, they're adapted to every single person. I'm telling you, we've got a platform now that every single person that can come to the platform will have their own AI co-pilot and a whole class of AIs that dedicate to them, but also each person have their own blockchain. So all the information that the AI is trained on to support and to feed into it, it could be fed from educational reports, it could be psychology reports, it could be healthcare reports, it could be anything, plus peer-reviewed research information that we fed into it. But their personal data is theirs. We don't own it. The NHS don't own it. The local government or national government don't own it. They have the sovereignty to own their data and utilize it as much they want. So we've created this platform that unlocks the true potential of what education, health, and social care can be delivered to those on the other hand. That's FullSpektrum.
It's brilliant, and I've been exploring AI from the point of view of unlocking a path to helping organizations kind of find more inclusivity. But I think what you're doing there is on a different level. It's brilliant. But with that, I mean, what you're probably finding is that you're probably, identifying areas as much as you're solving problems, you're probably identifying other areas that need addressing. And I'm fascinated. I mean, personally, I have such a bugbear about the education system. And like, even as you mentioned there about the medical industry, and the idea that, the idea that our doctors or our lawyers or whoever have to be top of their class is such an outmoded way of thinking. And obviously you don't want a doctor who doesn't know what they're doing, but I want a doctor who can interpret symptoms and figure out what could be possibly wrong with me, and not go through the list of, well, this is what normally happens, and here's the drugs you normally take. And I feel like, we've created an education system that rewards people. And actually the funny thing is, the medical industry is renowned for neurodiversity, but in a different way, and more from the autistic spectrum side of things, and the ability to remember facts and reproduce facts for exams and stuff like that, and non-distraction focus and all these kind of things. But I guess, what do you think, like from the work you're doing so far? And I am a huge fan of technology, and understanding, obviously there are lots of people who have worries about AI, but there's also some incredible power with AI. But with the technology and with the work you guys are doing, how do you see the gap being bridged to creating a more inclusive environment for neurodiverse individuals, particularly in education?
It's a very, very good question, and it's a question that I think my daily experiences pretty much are the answer to it. And I'll answer this in the most brutally honest and direct way. We need to stop thinking or enabling the minute elements of society to take control of innovation and policy. And what I mean by that is, if you go to, the House of Commons, you go to the House of Lords, or you go to the boardrooms of, blue chip FTSE 500 companies, or you go into the laboratories of the most leading companies in the world that innovate, you don't really get much diversity of experience. You don't get, it's more of a monotony of, people of not that much diverse backgrounds, and therefore their experiences and their approaches and perspectives to how they can solve problems are very minimal. And so what you'll find is that if you've got people who are homogenized into one or a number of different schools, or homogenized into a number of different social experiences, or homogenized into various geo-fixed areas and so on and so forth, how the hell can you solve problems that affect everyone, particularly problems that affect the majority of people that don't represent them? And so what you'll find is that when you've got people that have a divergence of backgrounds and perspectives, how to look at things and address problems, because how you and I can address problems, they will always vary based on our viewpoint from that is dictated by our experiences. And so when it comes to creating new inclusive curriculum, or creating intersectionally inclusive, healthcare systems or social care systems, and this onset of integrated care as the new method of delivering support to people in the public sector, if the people who are developing the policies, the procedures, the mechanisms, the mandates, the performers, the protocols, the workflows, all those things are those who don't represent diversity, then you're gonna have the same things happening over and over again. So what I am doing, and what I intend to represent, is someone who, like me, you're looking at, young black male who was raised in a council estate in South London, single parent family on benefits, with a whole bunch of people around me that either went to prison, stayed in gangs and criminality, went jail, or, drugged off their head. So you find is that with all these different experiences that never dictate in terms of what I want to become, and I kind of approach a problem from a different perspective, one person's radical perspective with another person's perspective of genius. So, for example, when I've gone into Parliament, and I've been in Parliament multiple times to lobby for new laws that are now being considered and are implemented that can change the curriculum, particularly for teachers, with regards to the early identification support of children and people who are autistic or have special needs. When I've gone into Parliament, I've spoken to MPs and even ministers of this government and civil servants of the UK government, and I've shown them what I've created or the concept what I created, and they say, "This is brilliant. This is wonderful. Why is it not done already?" For me, it's common sense. Why is it common sense? Because I had to walk the road that I've been on to see the problems that affected me and a range of other people that have a similar background. But because I was lucky enough to be in environments that, really fortified and encouraged and enabled my innovation, that to me expresses my inner genius. But it's not just me. There are loads of other people out there that don't have these opportunities. And so the other thing that I must do, rather than just be the shining light or the example of, oh, Andre did it, you can do it too. No, that's not enough. You've got to open the doors and you've got to shepherd people through. You have to support. So for me, I also mentor and support of young entrepreneurs and innovators that struggle into space. I get contacts on almost on a weekly basis by young people who have gone into tech or in science and engineering, and they're dyspraxic or dyslexic or some sort of neurodivergence, and they've come to me and asked for advice and help, and I give it to them, and I don't charge, because the way I see it is that I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for the few people that saw my potential and saw the value that I had and gave and donated their time and their access to unlock it. I have to pay that back. So I think that is what we have to do in order to bring society to that type of level of inclusivity.
I completely agree. I mean, it is fascinating that the thing that the most common outcome I see for anybody with any form of neurodivergence from an education point of view, the most common outcome I see is just confidence that's battered. And, it leads then to internalizing bias, I suppose, for yourself. But it's also like, if you think about the kind of the biases that neurodiverse individuals face, not just in education, but in the workplace. What do you see as the solution? Like I have particular issues around the whole hiring, the whole recruitment process, but even the what they call onboarding in the workplace. The idea that we don't have conversations with people to understand, well, how do you work best and how do you like to communicate and what is it that allows you to deliver your best performance? And yet we'll hire someone and then we won't bother with those kind of conversations. Or even, from my experience, an awful lot of people who have neurodiverse challenges are excluded from the recruitment process because it is so designed for the generic kind of label of what fits. And I suppose if you want what's typical, that you're excluding people before you even get into the conversation. What do you see from the work you're doing and the information you guys, the data you guys are gathering? What is a way to kind of, I suppose, to negate that, or even to do the hiring process better, or to challenge those biases in a way that gives people opportunities that they may not have had before?
So I've been lucky enough to be involved in conversations about, improving the workplace, a commercial or operational environment to be more inclusive. And with regards to the hiring process, the first thing that I advise, and also is one of the things that I'm working on as a solution and platform that can address this issue, is you have to understand or design the profile of the resource that's required. So, for example, when you like companies in the private sector, and some companies in the private sector that are quite diligent in terms of their procurement, what they do is they put together a tender. The tender basically puts a particular profile of the requirements, the specifications, the costs, all these things there, and they do it in a very diligent way. And then people then apply for it, and then those that meet the criteria close enough that meets a number of different indicators or requirements that add value, and that value is strategically calculated and factored into the operating processes of the company, they then get procured. And if procurement element is done correctly, that resource adds value. There's return on investment. So when you're looking at human resources, the procurement process, I say, is what you would need to emulate within the hiring process. Yes, there are a myriad of different factors and variables to consider. Consider them. Have conversations in terms of what you want, in terms of if you're going to bring someone on board, the first thing to understand is the why. Why bring on board? And then what? What are they going to do? And then how? How are they going to do it? And when? How long do we need it for? What is the expected duration of impact or value when we get our return on investment? And then finally, the who. Who is the person? Who are you going to go for? Who's going to fit the profile of that? Now, again, my response definitely is in reference to the previous answer that I gave, the previous topic that we spoke about, which is obviously if you've got people with very narrow minds or very narrow perspectives because of how exclusive the environment of decision makers are. You've got exclusive boards, you've got exclusive executive boards, you've got exclusive hiring teams, and so on and so forth. Then it's going to impact on the quality of the profile that you would collaborate towards, right? So you have to ensure that there is inclusivity in the profiling design process. Then once the profiling design process can be designed not just on the characteristics of the role, but of the psychology and the capability, and then have a variance of it, and then you go and recruit. And then when you do that, you do it, and you should be doing it, not based on looking at a CV and you're reading a CV, and anyone can lie. I can be economically true for my CV. I can sound like the biggest, baddest, smartest person in the world. And I can sound like the biggest and baddest and smartest person in the world if you give them the opportunity to interview, because you're taking a snapshot of what you think their profile is. And if you're diligent enough, yes, you'll go and get references and all the things there to give a wide perspective of what they are. But what you're not doing is you're not looking at things such as the personality type. You're not doing additional screening methods, or you're not doing any further tests or examinations. Like, for example, to get into medicine, you've got to do a number of cognitive tests, GAMSATs and MCATs and so on and so forth. So one should design a number of different tests to not rule out in terms of if they're capable, but to understand whether if those unique parameters inside them fit the profile. If they fit the profile, great. And if you've got a number of different candidates that fit a particular profile of capability and competence, fantastic. They need to look at the profile of their personality and their ability to add value, the extra 15%. So this is where, if you want to make your work environment neuroinclusive, become neuroinclusive. Have neurodivergent people involved in the design of these roles and designing environments, but also, most importantly, always look at the factor of the unknown. Always look at, you may take the person one day and that person may be different another day, or there might be other elements that you may not understand or realize. So, for example, I could join a company and they would know, or I explain to them that I'm dyspraxic and dyslexic, and I might get a confirmed diagnosis of ADHD. So when that happens, you need to also have the environment where you can actually hold continuous and extensive dialogues of what are your needs, what are your capabilities, what is your superpower, and then have that added to the conversation of how to structure and to iterate the environments, because like with anything, nothing static, is dynamic. So be dynamic in your in the manifestation of your inclusive environments. It's not based on one D&I specialist telling you one thing. It's a continuous road, continuous evolution. It's a continuous discovery of how truly and intersectionally divergent your environment is, your workplace is, so you can be intersectionally inclusive within it.
Yeah, it's really, it kind of moves from the checkbox mentality of diversity initiatives and kind of really embeds neurodiversity in the cultural DNA of the company, doesn't it? It's like that's kind of the ultimate goal. But what I do think is interesting is and I'd be interested to hear what you think are like the ways we kind of reframe traditional notions of intelligence. That if you're like, I've got two kids who are both dyslexic and dyspraxic, and they've had struggles throughout their schooling career. Just their confidence has been battered because they're slowing the class down because they can't move on to the next thing because they don't understand the thing that's in front of them. And obviously you understand this as well, that there's a whole load of challenges with it. I've got ADHD, and I only got diagnosed about 6 months ago, so I'm in this whole new discovery of understanding about how in school I always felt I was intelligent, but I never had evidence to back it up because I struggled in school. And how I've kind of discovered intelligence through experiences as I've gotten older and gone out into the world and done stuff. And I went back and did a degree in college in my late 20s and 30s, which was an eye-opener to me that I actually could do a degree because I didn't believe I had any smarts. But I guess the question is, like, one of the things that needs, like, the reframing is needed all around this stuff, right? But there's understanding of intelligence, but also understanding of, like, why is it important for a company to celebrate diverse individuals? And this isn't just neurodiversity; it's diversity in general. And I'm always much more interested in talking about inclusion than diversity, because I think companies are very good at ticking boxes around diversity, but I think they fail on the inclusion side of things because they don't appreciate the importance of what we're doing and the importance of what these diverse people are bringing to the company. So from the point of view of, challenging traditional notions of intelligence, but also challenging that traditional notion of what a leader is, or what a high performing person is, and understanding, like, the importance of creativity and innovation and all these things. From your perspective in the work you do, where do you start with the challenging those notions, so people start to understand that you're not actually saying we want you to make allowances for us. We want you to recognize that we are intelligent and are offering something completely different that could radically improve your organization?
The conversation has to be done in multiple stages. With me, my approach, especially when I'm speaking to business leaders or anyone that's in a position of influence or decision making when it comes to a group of people that represent some form of neurodivergence. Essentially, what I say to them is that I say, what do you want to achieve? What is it? What is success to you? What is improvement? What is attainment? What is the key directive or the impact you want to manifest within your organization? And then I'll say certain things such as, financial growth. I want to have X amount of, transactions, or this, that, or that, or it could be something more procedural, so on and so forth. And I say, okay, so what's the strategy in achieving it? And when I start to really break down a much more granular conversation about, tactical methods to high performance, one of the things that tends to come in the conversation is about, the ability to have people who don't think in straight lines, that can navigate labyrinths. Because what I try to explain to them is that when you're entering into a world that's become much more complex, there are much more decisions, or the issues that we are there to solve and therefore to provide value are becoming increasingly complex. And also, when it comes to innovation is, in most cases, a race. Who's the first, or who's going to be the first to solve this problem? Who's going to solve the problem the best way? And sometimes, and most times, innovation is iterative. So you'll take what someone else has done and you try to improve it. So when you think of businesses, particularly those that are commercialized, and you're looking at competitors, you say, okay, that company has designed this solution in this way. We want to be better than them. We want to surpass them. They're taking X amount of a market share. So you don't do the same thing. You try and find an alternative approach, an alternative perspective, and innovative back of it. You invest in research, development, and innovation. So the most innovative minds are those that are always going to think things in different paradigms. Superpowers. Find the X-Men. I always said, you want to find those gifted people out there that don't focus on elements of the personality that may you may find odd or strange or quirky or anything else like that. As long as they don't, instill a threat, then embrace the madness. Look at the superpowers. Look at what they can do that can add towards the high performance culture and attitude that you want to implement within your organization. And so all these different attributes, you understand that there's a expansive profile of all these different people, and no one person is the same. So once you say, "Oh, this person can do this," is great. You then invest in them and put them in the right positions, and invest in them and empower them and enable them to continue or even surpass the standards of high performance that you've set. So you have to look at the inclusion process as not as one as, oh, this is the woke culture and we're doing it because we have to. If you're going to approach in a way where you're doing it as a method of conformity, you're not going to get the most value of it. When we look at it in terms of inclusivity, is the ability for us to unlock the true potential, or we can do it, and therefore we have a competitive advantage. That's how you look at it. So you look at it in terms of what's the advantage? How do you facilitate it? How do you manifest it? How do you manage it? Keep it sustainable by continuing to invest in them. But then also, one of the key things that people tend to forget within the concepts of diversity and inclusion is the equity element. So when you find that magic formula of it works with this person or works with this group of people, don't ever think that it can consistently work with a whole range of people. You've got to identify the variances of each person's capabilities and its value, but then to give them a much more personalized and individualized approach to invest in them. So I always illustrate the whole term of equity to people within D&I. Say, imagine you have a group of little boys. You've got one that's 5'9", you've got one that's 5'7", you've got one that's 5'3", you've got one that's 4'9", and they're all trying to look over this fence, and the fence is probably about 5'6" in height, and only two of those boys can actually see over it, and everybody else can't. So if you then say, okay, everyone's on the same level, you're going to only see a couple of them have capabilities to see and therefore achieve or to attain. So then you have to then look at what's the difference between the different heights, and then create different levels or different heights of platforms. Therefore, the equity has to be determined so that everyone is at the equal point. So when you apply that same philosophy into your workplace, you then have to identify that every single strategy or placement or method of unlocking one's true potential and therefore provide that value, you have to individualize it. You have to fully understand and continue to understand and continuously adapt the element of equity to ensure that it's not just at level playing field. It's about ensuring that if that person says, if you want the best from me, and then the best around me, and then the best within me, you give it to them and you let them achieve, let them cook, and let them show in terms of what type of productivity and improvements they have, as long as they get that individual process rather than a generalized approach for some form of conformity.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And actually, I'm just thinking back to the education side of things. And when you talk about equity the way you do there, far better than I could, in fairness. But when you talk about it, it really does kind of resonate with me. And I think about the ways the education system can better accommodate neurodiverse learners, and cultivate talent that's unique, rather than trying to generate a load of learners who are the same and do things the same way. And I kind of look at the likes of ChatGPT and the dawn of AI as an opportunity for people to learn and express their individuality in a different way. And that surprises people when I say that, because they go, ChatGPT, sure, that just generates the same answers for everyone. But really, it's only as good as the prompts you give it, and it's only as good as the human interaction you put on it when you get the outcome. And I know ChatGPT 5 is coming with all sorts of ridiculous powers and from an AI perspective. But I guess what I'm wondering is, if if that's an example of a way that a kid could show, there's a colleague of mine runs an online college, and they embrace. It's called the Longford International College, and they do brilliant courses, and they're very much aimed at kind of like, say, athletes coming out of sport, trying to find a path into third level education when they didn't really have a formal education to begin with, say footballers in England or whatever, you know. But they created this learning platform to help people, and typically people who are neurodiverse, kind of figure out a pathway to third level qualifications. But one of the things they do is with ChatGPT, they encourage the students to use ChatGPT. But what they do is they use it like a maths problem. And they say, we want to see all the prompting, all the work you did to get to the outcome you got to. And then put your own kind of individual kind of leaning on it. And to me, that's something that I could relate to and get on board with if I was back in school a lot quicker than the traditional stuff that we were being taught in our industrial revolution model of school, where we're all sitting in lines and we're all taking orders and we're all doing the 9 to 5, whatever the case may be. For you, thinking about kind of the personalized learning and adaptive technology that's out there now, what role do you think that plays in creating more inclusive educational experiences, I suppose, for neurodiverse students?
I think it's, and I'm not just saying it as one of the leaders within the space that's utilizing technologies for this very benefit, but I think it's becoming, or it has become fundamental. And the reason why I say that is because, I mean, look, now you'll probably learn new things about yourself each and every single day. I am too. How is it feasibly possible to find any type of individual to literally sit down with you every single day to ask you questions, to start scaffolding their interpretation of what makes you tick, what pathways of cognition are you going to apply to this problem you're trying to solve? How are you going to work around this? And all these things, come up with all this information that is going to then be used to advance. So essentially, we all could do it a co-pilot. Now, it's not feasible to have someone do that. And to be honest with you, those that have the equivalent of having a co-pilot to help navigate and facilitate their education or care are those who are wealthy enough and astute enough to have that resource. So if we are going to say, we sat down and we've spent the past 42 minutes talking about, neurodiversity inclusion. And if we're going to be having these conversations and invite people to have similar conversations like this as kind of like a common dialogue in today's world as a trending topic or a trending element of discovery, then we have to sit down and say to ourselves, well, if more people are discovering that they're neurodivergent, then how the hell can you expect the same velocity of support that's out there? So when it comes to AIs, when it comes to any type of large language model or anything that is data driven to provide a level of personalization, these technologies and the way that these technologies can continuously do it every single day, 24/7. It doesn't sleep, doesn't eat, doesn't take maternity leave, doesn't go off days of sick, and it doesn't have a bad mood unless there's some sort of element of programming or prompting that, can be easily, fixed. Essentially, what you want is technology designed by a divergence of innovators like myself that can all adapt it to different ways of solving a problem, but also to build it in a way where there is this harmony. Harmonic innovation is one of the key things that people need to start talking about and need to start addressing. It's something that I've been raised on what I do, and essentially the way that we've built our AI. Because to be very honest with you, the AI we've got, it's not our own AI built. It's leveraging existing systems like ChatGPT, like Gemini, like all the other ones that are out there. But essentially, what we're doing is that we're prompting and developing and we're conditioning these bots to learn from each other. But also, we've conditioned the bots to say one thing at any given moment. I don't know. And so what you'll find now is in the advancement of generative AI technologies, of large language models and natural language processing, there is a technology or there's a method called retrieval augmented generation, or RAG for short. And essentially what this is that it's a way that AIs can be adapted to retrieve information from various sources at the point of attempting a generative response. So, for example, you may have experienced yourself where you'll speak to ChatGPT and ask that range of questions, and in spots in the beginning, middle, or end, it could be very scarily accurate. But then there's certain times of it when it starts to utter some absolute nonsense, and it will go off tangent, and you think, no, stay on track. What's happened is that's what we call hallucination. AIs can hallucinate when it doesn't have the data or the data sets preconditioned or attached to the model to provide that generative approach. And so when you've got current AIs at the moment and you want them to come neuroinclusive, they can only do it to a certain extent, because inclusivity of any format is an ever expanding concept. So if you now have AIs that are designed to have its own cognition and metacognition as learning how it learns, and applying that learning element to then get better support from other AIs to support it, so kind of like chains together, like a chain of DNA. Effectively, where inclusivity needs to go, and what we have done in our research and what we developed on our platform, is you don't want to personalize, you want to hyper personalize. You want to look at, in terms of personalization, shouldn't just be dedicated on a linear format of prompts that come from any one particular person. You want to say, I'm going to take the prompts from that person, I'm going to take prompts from another person, I'm going to take the prompts from not just from voice, I'm going to take prompts from anything that is physical, mechanical, anything that's biochemical, anything that is of different elements. So there's so many different recognition elements within ourselves that dictate what we do or how we should approach things, or elements we can learn from and identify. So what you'll find is that the breakthrough of AI to reach a high level of inclusivity, and what I like to call hyper-personalization, is how do we then say a generative response can be facilitated from the information prompted from the user, information that could prompt from similar users, information that already exists from different data sources, information that other AIs may have been prompted by other specialists, information that's stored from private and public sector, information that is provided by a government specialist or a policymaker or a think tank, information that's also been acquired by the movement of the body, information that's acquired from your facial movements, information that could be acquired from, doing a blood test, information that could be acquired from taking a drop of sweat, information from all different areas that all are aggregated and stored in one cyclic process that it can then try and generate a response. But that's the best part. That cyclic process can then be monitored by other AIs that look and say, oh, I'm not too sure about that, Can you verify that information is correct? And if they say, I can't, I do not know, then they recruit others that can. And so this swarm, this kind of like hive mind that can work together and everything like that, and therefore true inclusivity that can be formulated in a fraction of a second, multiple times a day, thousands of times a single moment across a whole population of people. And that support can be provided. The hyper-personalization unlocks true inclusivity. That is what I would say where technology is going. And I'm delighted to say that what we've done in FullSpektrum, technology that we actually have, we've tested, and it's come with some amazing results. It's what we're doing right now.
I love it, man. I'm actually dying to hear more, and I'll be talking to you off air about that, because there's so much that has lit a fire in me today just talking about that. I'm very conscious of time, but what do you think the role is for policymakers to ensure that the fear of AI doesn't restrict the possibility of the benefits for inclusivity off the back of this?
The role of policymakers is to verify and question. The art of policymaking isn't just drafting legislation that is built on a particular perspective that a whole governance basically predicates as the one that we can accept as the gospel truth. Because legislation, as we've seen in terms of how politics today, there's a lot of room for improvement. And there's some absolutely bizarre policies that are implemented. But the key thing is that whenever policies are implemented and they U-turn, I mean, look at the Conservative government, the amount of U-turns they have in certain policies is a joke. But that's what happens in innovation. The one thing you have to either communicate to policymakers, or if you are a policymaker, one thing you have to embrace within yourself is the capability to innovate, to say what it could be one day could change another day, as long as you're open to the consideration of other perspectives and other events from an increasing plethora of people, or instances and experiences, and so on and so forth. So one of the things that I've not just advocated, but some of the designs I've got is basically building a multi-AI think tank. And so again, in the platform that we're building, it is going to have that component where, because of all these interactions that come, there's a lot of kind of like byproducts of information that can come from generative events. So the way our technology works is that each blockchain has its own dedicated AI co-pilot. When these AIs then converse and the information is formed, that information then forms a new blockchain itself. That information then changes and becomes, it will start to look like, if I was to illustrate it, like neurons in the brain, effectively. Now, what then happens is all those byproducts of all these different crossover generative events, you can then say, okay, there's a whole list of them that's out there. So in our blockchain, the ledger can say, okay, this event came from this time, this source, and it owned by this person, so on and so forth. So you can take all the information in and use that information to then challenge various policies, or use the information to then continuously generate iterations of new policies that are learning from fingerprints and footprints of people living daily lives. So you don't have to be a policymaker that is constantly, trying to keep up with current affairs, or pay for, loads of think tanks that represent every single, section of our community, which would be the right thing to do, by the way. Like, people do that there and then. I think you should do that now. But if you want to really stay on top of the game and you want to be very evolutionary in terms of how policy can be designed, redesigned, and implemented for maximum conformity and maximum complement, innovate. Try and adapt technology in an ethical way to appreciate this divergence of thought and implementation of the policies required, but also ensure that your governance reflects on the societies that you resemble or govern over. Because if there's that homogeneity that I mentioned earlier in the conversation, then unfortunately you're going to get the same adverse outcome. And that's what we don't want. So, think different. I'm going to quote Steve Jobs and Apple Incorporated, think different, and continue to think different, because when you do that, then some remarkable things can happen when you actually embrace that little bit of madness to unlock everyone's potential.
Love it, man. Absolutely brilliant. Andre, thanks so much for taking the time. It's been eye-opening. Love the work you guys are doing. And like I said, I'll take it offline. I'll ping you a message later on, because there's so much you guys are doing that I can see uses for. Thanks a million, man. Look forward to chatting to you again. Really appreciate the chat. And,
my pleasure.
Keep up the good fight.